Hi guys, this is the advisor and welcome back to my channel. Today I have an extremely interesting case for you. Something that you have probably never heard before or nothing quite like this. This is one pertaining to a relationship situation. There is this young lady. She gave me the story about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but because I was so caught up with the whole matter of the crime situation in Jamaica, I had to put out those first. But now let me get around to this. She needed some advice, and I gave it to her after hearing this situation. Now, this is pretty interesting, so sit tight and hear what it is. All right, this young lady, she's up in her early 30s. She's a very sophisticated person. She's intelligent, she's educated, she's a go-getter, she runs her own business. In fact, she runs several businesses. She is quite an outgoing, she knows how to dress, she has pride, dignity, self-respect, ambition, all the attributes, both physical, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual attributes that any thinking man would be interested in. Very wonderful person. And she met and started a relationship with someone who is the total opposite of everything that she is. Total opposite. As a matter of fact, minus zero of everything. Not even hit the floor, but gone beneath the floor. The guy, I won't read out his lack of attributes, but you'll pick it up as we go along. And the thing is, she don't know how she got there. She doesn't know how she even reached it, how she even, or when, or how she reached in this relationship. But here's her story. She was a widow because she was married to a gentleman who is older than her, maybe about 20 years older, I figured. And while in this, eventually her husband died. She was living with him over in a Caribbean island, and he passed on, and she moved back to Jamaica, and she rented a flat, half side of a house in the Kingston 20 area. Now, while there, she was there, living there on her own with her 6-year-old daughter, and she was running her business from home. You know, she had several online businesses, and she had shipping business where she would, drop ship things to persons. She had her clientele and so on and so on. So she was making a decent living, and she was quite an independent person and a real go-getter. Anyway, the house where she lived, it was a duplex. She had one side of the house, and her neighbor had the other half, or the other section of the house. What happened was that there was this fellow who would pop by and visit her neighbor, the other tenant, every day. Come sit down and rap with those tenants maybe for an hour or two every day. And by that fellow coming to the house, she and him became acquainted, and they became on speaking terms. They were on speaking terms. But over time, the young man would do simple tasks for her. Remember now, she is hard at work every day, sitting in front of her computer or her laptop doing stuff for her clients, both locally and overseas, and so on. So there was one or two occasions where she would ask him if she's too caught up with her job to go and pick up her child at school, and he volunteered. He would go and pick up the little girl from school in the afternoon while she is continuing to run her business. eventually, because he visits so often, she, depending on him, if she have any errands to run, he would volunteer to run errands like go to the post office, drop off some packages that she's shipping to clients, or, she could send him to pay her bills, like to the paymaster or so, she would send pay bills here or there, things like that. And he never took any money from her. He just volunteered. He just said it's something he wanted to do. This went on for, several weeks, maybe 2 months or more. But eventually, one of the time, he was at the house and visiting the other friend, of course, visiting her neighbor, of course. And she came around the back and there was some akis on the tree and she asked him to pick some akis for her. He picked the akis. But at the time when he picked the akis, she was back around her desk doing her work on her computer and so on. And he put them in her kitchen, And when he put them in her kitchen now, he asked her if he could prepare them for her, like take them out of the pods and so on and so on. And she said yes. Eventually, it got around to the point where she asked him if he asked her if he could just cook dinner. He would prepare it for her, convince her that he knew how to cook and so on. And she said, all right, well, go ahead. There's a kitchen. Go ahead, cook it. He eventually cooked, yes. And after he finished cooking, he went and he picked up her daughter from school. Well, it started out like that eventually over time he stopped visiting the neighbor and started more or less hanging out by visiting her. And he would do all those little menial tasks that she wanted done. Well, she needed the help, yes. So she didn't feel anyway, and she looked forward to seeing him because of the assistant that he gave her. She could spend more time doing her job and earning more money. But he wouldn't take any money from her. He just did that. But he started cooking now more regularly, and when he cooked, he would partake of the meal. He would cook enough that he can get. So this went on again for some time, and it reached a stage where he used to spend like 2 hours on the premises. Then he start spending 3, then 4, then more, because he would normally, because he wasn't working. So he have all day can spend there anyway. So he would spend a few hours there. And eventually he spent not only more time on the premises, but that time now start spending with the young lady or in her section of the premises. And eventually he started staying. He normally would come there around by 10 or 11 o'clock and stayed until maybe 4. Eventually he started staying till 5, then till 6, then till 7, and then till 8 or after 8. During this time, of course, there was no talk. He never spoke to her told her he liked her or was interested in her in any way, shape, or form. He never said that he had any interest in her sexually or emotionally or anything. He was just like a platonic friend. Well, she thought he was just a platonic friend, just an acquaintance, and she was comfortable with that. Anyway, because at the time she said she was not seeking a relationship. She was just going with her life. She was very busy, and she didn't even think that at this point in her life there was any space for a man, really. If one comes along, fine. But she had took a nonchalant view. But she said to me that he was definitely not her type. He was definitely not somebody she would even think of having a relationship with. Anyway, one night he was there until around after 8, hanging out, because she didn't mind him hanging around, because he was just like one of her brethren, and fine. She was fine with that. However, one night while he was there, after 8, shots started firing in the area. Oh, by the way, I should mention this. He lived about a mile away, and he would normally walk home when he lived there in the evenings. He lived with his mother and I think two sisters. He lived, about in another community, but in the same Kingston 20 area. It so happened, though, that that night shots were firing in the area, and it seemed that it was coming from the direction that he would have to travel to go home. And he was getting worried, saying, boy, he's not sure he would want to be on the street at that hour and, walking home. And she agreed with him. So she said, here's what. Stick around, stay overnight, and go back in the morning, because right now, she said she wouldn't want anything to happen to him on the street at that hour, because she would consider it her fault and she couldn't live with that. So she gave him pillow and she gave him blanket and sheet or whatever, and he stayed in the living room. He could just knock back on the settee overnight. So he stayed. Anyway, during the course of the night, he came into her bedroom and started, caressing her body and all of that, and so on and so forth. Well, one thing led to another. She said she tried to resist, and she said he raped her. But in my personal opinion, there was no rape. She consented. Maybe put up little token resistance, but as far as I'm concerned, she consented. Anyway, she said he raped her. But the next morning, they woke up and she was quite bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, no question again of rape. And she said that he just hung out there. And they enjoyed the rest of the day. He took her daughter to school for the first time after the quote-unquote rape. He took her daughter to school next morning and came back, and he was there. Well, after that, it's like he spent the day, then he went home the night and sleep to his house. Then he came back and then he stayed 1 or 2 nights at her house. Then he started spending a 3 night or so. But he normally would go home and back, and this went on for another time till he was like sleeping at her nights, her house, most of the week. During this time now, she said, hold on. She realized all of a sudden, hey, I'm in a relationship. It dawned on her that, hey, I'm in a relationship with this man. And she never saw it coming. So now she said, all right, listen, if you're going to be here, if you're going to be in a relationship with me, you can't be sleeping elsewhere at night. So move your things in, move in with me, and let us just live together as a family then, since you're already sleeping here. Move in. I can't have my man and he goes wherever and sleep and then come back here in the days and then go off and sleep elsewhere. So he said, okay, fine. But she realized that in the days when he stayed there, okay, from she met him, he always had just 2 suits of attire. 2 suits. As he had, first of all, he wear a flip-flop slippers. And when he comes back, when he started staying over like overnight or so, he would carry another suit. When I said suit, I mean a shorts, one of those plaid shorts that reach down to his knees, and a t-shirt. And when he was coming over, he would wash those overnight and he would put on the other shorts and t-shirt, but the same flip-flop. So after she told him to move in, she realized that he never carried anything else. But she kept telling him, move in, bring your clothes and move in. But he never carried anything else. And after a while, she realized that, hey, Christmas was coming and he didn't have any more clothes. The clothes he owned in his life was a flip-flop, 2 pair of shorts, and 2 t-shirts. That's all he owned. But he was still being very helpful. Eventually, she realized that one day she discovered that he could neither read nor write. That this man could barely scrawl him own name. She had to start with him from baby. She said she went like a baby. She had to try to get him to read. She went out and she buy ABC books, and because she said that since she's going to be in a relationship with him, might as well she teach him how to read, because she couldn't see herself existing with a man who does not know how to read and write. She went out, she brought the ABC books, she bought flashcards, she bought things that you'd buy for a 4 and 5-year-old to start him out. But he showed absolutely no interest. After weeks of coaxing him and encouraging him and trying to boost him up, he didn't want to know. He just had absolutely no interest. He thought he was fine. He thought not being able to read, he was fine. So she just couldn't get him. He didn't want to learn a trade. He was saying that he want to run a little shop. And so, although she didn't understand how he could run a shop. But surprisingly, she said he could check money. Eventually, she went and she met his parents. She met his mother and his 2 sisters, and she met his 2 brothers. One of his brothers has just come out of jail. She don't know how long he had spent there, but he had been in prison for quite some time. His other brother sold weed. His mother was also illiterate, and his 2 sisters were dark as midnight. She don't know if they could read, but she know that the family was a totally one of those families where a nightmare. They were a disaster. Anyway, she still decided to make it work. She took him out. She bought him a total wardrobe. Shirts upon shirts and pants and shoes and socks and underwear and everything, and kitted the man out totally. And say, okay, she's going to stick around with him and make it work. He was still helpful, but he had no ambition. He had no plans to go anywhere in life. She couldn't talk to him. He was jealous. He was overbearing. He was opinionated. And 1 or 2 times, he was very disrespectful. And sometimes he tried to put his hand on her. Because, these men who are illiterate tend to be very dark and don't know how to reason. And she don't know how she got herself in that place. Anyway, he also had, but she did her best. He even had a daughter that she took under her wings. And because the mother wasn't taking care of the child, and she took that daughter under her wings, his child, and the child was about 12 or 13. Surprisingly, the child itself, his daughter, had no interest in school or academics. That's why, Anyway, before I go into that. Anyway, things got so bad, he realized that this man wasn't going anywhere and he would just be dragging her down. But it took her about 5 years to find that out, to realize that there was no future in this man. And she decided to just call it a day. It was extremely difficult for her to move on because he didn't want to let go of her. But eventually, she managed to get out of it. And it was an horrifying situation. More or less, she told me her story because she wanted to get it off her chest. And she didn't want to tell any family because she knew how judgmental they could have been, because she just shouldn't have gotten herself being who she is getting there. And one of the most important questions she wanted to say is, how would I avoid getting into a place like that again? How would I avoid it? How did I get here? And what pointers could I give her? Well, here is what I told her. I said, listen, it was good for you to have the help, but psychologically, you should have maintained boundaries. You knew what you wanted in life, and your having not set boundaries was the reason for the situation you're in. What I mean by setting boundaries, the boundaries don't necessarily have to be physical, but they have to be mental. Every time that he did a job for you or completed a task for you, like going and picking up your daughter, going to pay a bill, you should have paid him. Pay him a specific amount, arrange an amount of money and pay him. He deliberately, he might be illiterate, but he's smart. He wore you down. And how he wore you down was by making you hold tabs to him. He wanted you to owe him a lot of favors. And when he owe you favors, you would be more receptive to his needs and to his desires. So what he did work for you, and he did things, integral things, important things that you wanted done, and then he would not accept payment. And that now made you beholden to him. Now, what you should have done was to have paid him. And once you had paid him money, psychologically, you would have maintained a boss-employee relationship, so to speak. You wouldn't owe him anything whatsoever. And therefore, he would not feel that you and him is quabs. As we say, quabs in Jamaica, it means equals. And once you and him is not quabs, that psychological boundary would have been there. And he would not have been able to pass in place and fly past him nest, as we would say, and go into certain other things that you would want to get involved in. Again, once you realize who he was, or you realize that he was getting under your skin, you should have stepped back. You should have created boundaries, and no boundaries had been created. And another important thing to note, is that, you see, it is important for us as human beings. Once we know what we want, we try to not get close enough to the person that we don't want, that they could ever get under our skin or get into our psyche the way this man did. So all I'm saying, in future, it can happen. Yes, you can get into a relationship against your better judgment because you did not set boundaries and stop certain things before they reach a certain stage. So in life, all you do, stay away from certain people. Don't let them even do certain tasks for you. And if they do certain tasks for you, pay them, and let them not stay at your house beyond a certain time of the day, so that things will never develop any further. So that's how this man got under your skin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this can actually help you in future and let you know how things can go very, very wrong, even though you had no intention for them to go that way. So guys, until my next video,